तू चलता चल, तू चलता चल, तू चलता चल, तू बढ़ता
So, welcome to No Frills Academy, sir. And for the benefit of our students, today we are honored to have Major General V.D. Dogra, Ati Vishesh Seva Medal, as our guest. Sir was commissioned into Pune House in 1981. At IMA, he won the prestigious Sword of Honor and was also the gold medalist for standing first in the Order of Merit. Sir commanded Pune Horse, 180 Armored Brigade and an infantry division. He has served in various staff and instructional assignments and gained combat experience in Jammu and Kashmir, as well as part of UN peacekeeping forces in Angola. Sir is a committed sports person and an adventure enthusiast. He participated in a number of cycling events and has cycled from Leh to Chandigarh over 5 of the highest mountain passes, ranging from 30,400 feet to 17,600 feet, as well as in the northeast of India, from Sela Pass at 14,000 feet to Bumla Pass at 15,400 feet on the Chinese border. A motivational and TEDx speaker, in 2018, he did Ironman Austria at the age of 58 in 14 hours and 21 minutes to become the first serving Indian Army officer and the only general in the world to do so. In July 2019, he once again took on the Ironman competition held in Germany and bettered his own time by 41 minutes, completing the grueling race in 13 hours and 40 minutes. He was awarded the Ati Vishesh Seva Medal in March 2019 by the President to recognize his distinguished service of an exceptional order. So welcome to you, sir. We have some questions for our students, the youth of the country, and thanks a lot for agreeing to speak to them. So I'll be posing you the question, sir. The first question is that you won the gold medal at NDA and the Sword of Honor at IMA. Apparently, you were good at academics as well as outdoors. Now, most of our youth feel that, balancing academics and sports doesn't work out. And the feeling in the parents also say that, पढ़ोगे लिखोगे तो बनोगे नवाब and खेलो कूदोगे तो बनोगे खराब kind of thing is there. So can you throw some light for the benefit of our youth that how could you motivate to do yourself and maintain balance in your academics as well as outdoor activities?
Before I answer that, I want to narrate to them actually what happened to me in NDA. When I joined the NDA as a first termer, I was put into the squad for weak cadets, physically weak cadets, and I was finding it difficult to pass my tests. Therefore, up to the end of my second term, I was in the squad which used to do extra PT in the before games. And so much of ragada we got that by the time the study period came, I was so tired, I couldn't study. As a result of this, what happened to me in NDA was my physical ability went up. But because I was focusing so much on my outdoors, my academics came down. And I started with a CGPA of 4.8 in my first term, and I passed out with a CGPA of 2.9 in my sixth term.
Okay.
And that was below the required amount of CGPA to actually pass out. 3 was the minimum. But because my outdoors was so good, I was best in drill, best in OLQ, best in outdoors. They ignored that, and at 2.94, they let me go through. Now, I learned a lesson out there that it is important to balance both physical and academic. Because as a result of this low CGPA, I was 7 in the order of merit in NDA. I was very high in physicals, but low in the academics. So when I came to IMA, I said I must balance both. So I started putting in effort to study. And I put in more effort on my physical side also by, when we were running in a squad, I would run with my knees coming higher, parallel to the ground, so that I put in, say, 1.5 times the amount of effort that other cadets were putting in. And because I was focusing on both, only because of my realization, I realized. And so I started focusing. And that was what actually led me to get a higher merit in IMA, by virtue of which I got the gold medal for being first in order of merit. And in addition to that, I also got the best in marching, best in shooting, rifle shooting, best in physical fitness, paramedal I got, and first among those commissioned into Armored Corps. So what I want to tell your viewers is that as long as you understand what you are doing is good for you, you need to understand that and then focus and concentrate and commit yourself. It will happen. You can do both.
That's great, sir. But when I met you first time in the NDA special, when you were in your fourth term and I was the second termer, you look to be a pretty strong guy. I never thought that you could have been, with this history, I had no clue about it at all.
You met me in my fourth term. So
Correct, sir.
First and second term was the trying times when I was actually put through the weak squads. And by the time I ended second term, I was then passing higher tests of even third term.
That's very, very nice, sir. Good, sir. I hope you are able to inspire our young students. You inspire me in any case, sir. Well, that's very nice, sir. So now you have been a high achiever from NDA till date. Now it's been a long journey. So please share your views and what keeps you motivated and what's the secret of your willpower, sir?
Well, I can't really say that there is any secret out here. It is just, a need to excel in whatever you are doing. So whatever task I undertake, I get this feeling that I must do it well. So it doesn't really matter whether it's a physical task or it's a written task or it's just a job given to you. If you can create the need to excel in whatever you do, to give it your best shot, then this motivation will soon become a part of you. It becomes a habit to step out of your comfort zone, give it your best shot, and then hope for the best. But if you try and just put in the minimum amount, or you try and, say, I will be choosy in where I put in my effort, then it won't become a habit. So in my case, I can only say that there is no secret, but I tried. I used to keep trying to do better at whatever I did, and then it became a habit. And then you are also competing with your own past performance. Once you start doing well, you want to maintain that graph. You don't want people to say, see, it was just a one-time spark, or you did well once. So that is what motivates you to put in more effort. I feel if your students attempt that technique of competing with their own performance and bettering it every time, then it should work.
That's great, sir. So that means your comfort zone is what is the discomfort zone for most people, actually?
Well, my comfort zone becomes a comfort zone only after you get used to the discomfort. So when I talk of developing mental endurance, you spoke of how do you maintain that endurance in the mind. When you develop mental endurance, one of the ways to develop mental endurance is to accept discomfort. So for example, if you can sit, but you prefer to stand willingly, and it's going to tire you out. Or when I was running in a squad, instead of putting in the least amount of effort, I was willingly putting in more effort so that I developed myself. These are techniques to enhance your mental endurance. You go for a shower and stand in the cold stream of water for 1 minute before you turn on the hot one. Your mind is accepting that, but your body is going to feel the chill, but it will develop your mental endurance. So there are techniques like this, which if your students apply, they are young now. If they start applying now, by the time, they reach the time of reckoning, it will be there.
Definitely, sir. Thanks a lot for sharing this. And I'm also learning a lot of things about you when we are talking now, because we never normally talk such stuff.
Yeah.
Great, sir. Fine. So so many times, external circumstances would have hindered your, achievement of your goals, your tasks, and particularly, in later stages, like when you went for an Ironman, it required a lot of commitment, discipline, and all that. So how were you able to manage all this?
See, circumstances all through your life are not something that you can control every time. Most of the time, the things which will happen around you will be beyond your control, and a lot of factors come into play, and that will happen to everybody. Even now, your students, when they are preparing for the exams, they may be very well prepared, they may be very intelligent, very competent, but they may not get through. So I keep, narrating this incident that any activity that you do, 70 to 80% is your hard work, and 20 to 30% is your luck. And it's very important to be lucky also. So you could be the best and keep trying and not make it. But that should not dishearten them. So I had the similar kind of situations like everybody else has, in their career. There are ups, there are downs, there are pulls, there are pressures. And you end up on the wrong side sometimes and on the right side sometimes. And that is mostly out of your control, why it happens. Well, I had a setback also in my career when after my command of my division, I was not approved for the next rank. And I had never prepared for it. I thought I didn't even need to think about it. I thought I was so good, I'll get through. And that was my mistake. You have to be prepared to fail. Failure must always be one thing that you prepare for in every event that you do. Now your students who are appearing must be prepared to fail, not make it. So when you're prepared, then the impact is not so bad. You fail, you step back, you introspect, you see what went wrong, and then you make a new plan and go for the goal again. So that can only happen if you're prepared. Now, in my case, I was not prepared, and I therefore took it badly. I felt humiliated. I felt, upset. Whatever was the reason, we will not discuss that, whether it was politics, whether it was bad luck, whatever. That's immaterial. But I felt that I had let myself down. I had let down my family. And that put me into a mold that I was avoiding meeting people. I was, shy to meet them because I was feeling humiliated. I started feeling low on confidence, self-esteem. And then I decided I must do something to get out of this. Because you can't allow yourself to decay because something has gone wrong. So there is a healing period, which I took, maybe 5 months, 6 months. I don't remember how much it was exactly. But there was a time when I cut myself off and I healed myself internally. And then I decided that I need to do something now, which will overshadow what I have not been able to achieve. And that's when I said the challenge should be big. And I came upon this event called the Ironman. And when I looked at it, I said, this is very impossible to do, but if I can do it, it'll be really good. And everybody whom I told about this, they said, you're a fool. You'll have a heart attack. You can't be doing the Ironman now. But I took that up as a challenge. And because I linked it to a bigger purpose, and the bigger purpose was getting my self-esteem back, getting my confidence back in my own mind. So when I went for the Ironman, I never told the army. They were not aware I'm going for Ironman. Nobody knew. So much so that I had briefed the chief about something just about a month before I left. But I chose not to tell him because it was a personal mission. And then once I did it, of course, then people got to know about it. So I feel that you can actually get out of whatever circumstances you're in, the ups and downs that you will all face in your lives, by working about it in a scientific manner like I just tried to describe to you.
That's great. That's great, sir. We have to keep winning our internal battles. So external things will keep sorting themselves out, sir.
True.
Very, very nice, sir. Thanks a lot, sir. So what major things you learned from your Ironman experience, particularly the one which you did while you were in service, sir, which you were talking about just now?
Well, the biggest thing I learned from doing the Ironman is that nothing is impossible. Before you set on to any task or any mission, it is important to first dream it. Everything starts with dreaming and dreaming big. Don't dream small. Don't hold your punches when you dream. Okay, dream big. Once you have dreamt big, then you make a plan on how to reach your dream. I went through that. Doing Ironman was a dream that time. And it was an impossible dream because the distances are so, phenomenal. 3.8 kilometers of swimming, 180 kilometers cycling, 42 kilometers running. And at 58, it seemed like a dream. It was a dream. But when you break that dream down in a scientific manner, smaller goals, give them timelines, spend time to train for that, then you find that every dream is achievable. And that was my biggest lesson, that hard work, commitment, and focus can actually get you whatever you want.
Great, great, sir. How can we overcome our self-doubts, sir? I'm sure you would have had self-doubts.
Plenty of self-doubts. It starts with a self-doubt. When I took the decision that I must do the Ironman, but my mind was not convinced. Self-doubt was there. So there were two wolves in my mind, one white, one black. Now the white wolf would tell me, you have to do it. It will get you out of whatever you are facing. And the black guy would tell me, you can't do it. It's beyond your reach now because you have never run 42 kilometers. You've never swum 3.8 kilometers. You're not used to swimming in the sea or a lake. So all those self-doubts start coming, and they will come to everybody in whatever be your endeavor. Now you have to try and find a means of suppressing the black guy and encouraging the white wolf. And in that, the biggest assistance is self-confidence. You have to have the faith that if I try, if I work hard, I may be able to do it, but there is a chance that I might fail. So that failure must always be kept in mind, but the hard work should be there. And like I said, 70 to 80% of your success is based on hard work. So that is the technique to be applied when you have this self-doubt in your mind. I also used a couple of other methods, which I will share with your viewers. When I started my training, I found that this training is going to be very long and hard. And every time I used to say, do a 100-kilometer ride or a 30-kilometer run, I would curse myself and I would say, I'm never going to do this damn thing again. Why have I got stuck in this? I would want to quit because, I could silently get away. I had not informed anybody really. So that is the time I decided that I don't want to quit and I need to find a method not to quit. So I took to social media and I announced, I'm going to do Ironman. I told my friends and family, I'm going to do Ironman. So there were mixed reactions. Some people smiled, some smirked, some laughed. The more polite didn't say anything. But I knew that now that I have told them, and if now I quit, then these guys are going to say, I told you, isse hoga nahi. Ye aise hi hawa mein maar raha hai. So he's not competent to do it. That was a big motivating factor to keep me from quitting. So even on the day of the event, on 1st of July 2018 in Austria, I told my wife, I said, I will die doing this event, but I won't quit because I know all those guys who saw my post on social media and others, they're all monitoring that app to see what is Vikram Dogra doing now. And if I quit, then it is going to just, say they're going to get this opportunity to say that I told you. So this is a technique called public pledging, which I think is a great technique to keep in the system when you feel you might quit. Had I not announced it and I had got disgusted while doing it, I would have silently quit and nobody would have known the better, But now there was no way I could quit. So this is a technique your people can also try.
Good. तो सलमान खान वाला एक बार आपने कमिटमेंट कर दिया तो उसके बाद तो फिर छोड़ना नहीं बनता है.
Because लोग बोलेंगे कि हमने बोला था ये तो कर नहीं सकते ऐसे.
Great, sir. Okay. So how do you rate the value of discipline and willpower and talent in our life? Though you have partially answered this question, but still, this was a question which came up from my students.
So there is no doubt that the value of all these willpower, commitment, discipline is topmost. But I want to tell your students that the discipline that you talk of, You know, a lot of people tell me, you may have had good discipline because you were in the army. I don't think we are understanding discipline if you consider the discipline in the army to be the discipline that we talk of. That is institutionalized discipline. Being in the army or being in any professional organization, there is a discipline. You come at the right time, you do the right things, you say the right, you speak the right stuff, and that is institutional discipline. Here I talk of personal discipline, self-discipline. Because when you take up something that you are pursuing, your goal, whatever will be your mission, it's your mission and it's your effort. And if you're not true to your effort, then you lack discipline, self-discipline. Nobody else is concerned about your passing the UPSC or your getting into the defense services. It's your mission. And if you don't study, you will be the loser. So that is where self-discipline comes in. Now, like I'll give you an example. When I did the Ironman, I was working and spending 10 hours at office. I was in Delhi, where the office hours are morning to evening. Now I could well say, I'm getting home at 6 in the evening. Where's the time to run? Where's the time to cycle? How will I swim? But that is lack of self-discipline. It's lack of commitment. It's lack of focus. Because I wanted to do the Ironman, so I had to find the time. I would therefore come back, change, and go for a run from 7 at night to 10 at night. Same timings I would swim, and this was over weekdays. And cycle on weekends because that is the time that is where you need the maximum amount of time. So this is, I would say, as an example of self-discipline, that you do things which are good for you. And I also equate self-discipline to self-love. You love yourself. It's your goal, and therefore do whatever is required to be successful in that.
सर हमारे बच्चों की तो मम्मियां बोलती हैं कि पोल्यूशन बहुत है, दिल्ली में भागने मत जाओ, आप इतनी लंबी लंबी साइकिल और चला रहे थे और भाग रहे थे सर आप of course at your age my mother is not there too.
This is the country where we've been born. And this is the country we've grown up in. And now to suddenly say कि हमारे देश में pollution बहुत है, traffic बहुत है, कीड़े बहुत है, मच्छर बहुत है, मक्खी बहुत है, but that's a reality. है तो है. और है doesn't mean you are not going to do anything in life. So you have to find solutions, not look at problems.
Correct. I hope our viewers are listening. So please don't quote your mothers to me in future ना कि हाँ अभी pollution बढ़ गया हुआ है, मम्मी मना कर रही है जाने के all that. उनको दिल डोगरा का दिखा देना what he was saying. He will be elder to most of your mummies. Fine. So ठीक है. So when he can do it, you can definitely do it. That's great motivation, sir. So there's some questions people are keen to know about your service. They feel what they want your views about what's the future of tanks in future warfare. What is the suitability of armored? How armored core is suited for non-technical background persons.
I'll first start with whether armored core is suitable for non-technical background person like me. I'm a non-technical. I'm a BA from India. And the armored core then trained me in everything that is required in terms of gunnery, driving and maintenance, communications. So I did the ultimate course, which is there also called the tank technology course. It's a 1-year course. Therefore, you don't worry about whether you are a technical guy or a non-technical guy, because armored core is a maneuver arm. It's a arm not where you have to repair equipment, but you have to use the weapon platform in a tactical manner, in a strategic manner, to be able to achieve whatever your aim is. So don't worry about the technical part. You will learn what is required. Whereas the future of the armored core is concerned, I, in my mind, have no doubt that the tank has a future like any other weapon system. As the threat perceptions against a weapon system increase, so does the technology of that weapon system. So the tank started in the First World War as a very, very basic structure to overcome the trench warfare, because you couldn't do any movement since both the sides were in the trenches, and therefore the tank came and then it started maneuvering. And then the missiles came, and then more armor came, and then a bigger missile came and more armor. So it's actually a race between what can destroy the tank and how the tank can protect itself. Having said that, you need maneuver on the battlefield. Battlefield is not about attrition. It's not about going and attacking head on and then seeing what is the outcome. That used to happen in the olden era where, armies came and clashed, and then at the end they counted their dead, and whoever had less, he won. Here you need to outmaneuver your enemy, not only on the ground, but in the mind. And you need equipment to do that. So I don't think any weapon system or any arm is going to be obsolete. It's a combined armed warfare. You have the infantry, you have the armor, you have the mechanized infantry, you have the artillery, the engineers. Everybody has a role, and it's this combined warfare which will see the day through. So in my opinion, the armored corps has relevance as it did now. And now probably you are seeing tanks being employed against the Chinese, where there are 2 brigades which have moved that side, and even more are heading there. So what was there on the Western Front anyway, that requirement has not changed. And now even towards the other side, we are looking at, the tank going there. So there is lots of future up there.
Thanks a lot, sir. I have a student, Anuj, who is the triathlon aspirant. So he has asked this question. He said his current time for 21 kilometers is 2 hours and 3 minutes. He has done 30 kilometers cycling in 1 hour 20 minutes. And he can swim breast and front crawl, and he can do underwater swimming and all also to a reasonable depth. So what are your advice to him, sir? How can he go about doing the thing?
Well, I will first start by saying that anybody and everybody can do the Ironman. But the requirement is that you put in the hard work. So these statistics that you're sharing actually don't really mean anything. Because the timing you've given, then I don't want to, boast, but my 21 kilometer timing is 1 hour 52 minutes. And my cycling speed of, say, 150 kilometers is an average of 35 kilometers an hour, where I can, so don't look at statistics. You look at a game plan. You want to do Ironman, in which you have to swim 3.8 kilometers, and the time you have to do it in is 2 hours and 20 minutes. If you can do it in 2 hours, it's a tick. You are okay in swimming. Next, you come on to cycling, 180 kilometers. You have to do it within, the swim and cycling together must finish in 10.5 hours. So if you're taking 2 hours there, 8 hours is your cutoff for cycling. Now you divide 180 by 8 and you see what speed you get. If you can do 180 after the swim in that, you're okay. Having done these two, then you are left with 7 hours to do a 42 kilometer. I think even if you walk, you will do 42 kilometers in 7 hours. So that should be your endeavor. Don't ask me or ask anybody else. Work your plan as per your capability, how much time you can spend. Therefore, train. Once you reach what I've told you, you'll be able to do it.
So just one personal thing comes to my mind. I'm also into sports. I mean, not like the Ironman kind of level things. How about managing your diet? Protein intake. Vitamins, hydration, and some tips on these things. I know you've been into fitness for quite a long time, and your son is also seriously into fitness. You would be having good knowledge on these stuff, sir.
So I did a lot of research on this. When I did the Ironman, I had no trainer. I didn't join any gym, and I had no nutritionist. But I did a lot of research, and therefore I can give you exactly what's required. Nourishment are of two types. One is when you're preparing, and one is on race day. I'll first talk of race day. When you are in the race, so that is the same nourishment you're going to do when you're training also. Not after the training, but during your, say, you're doing a 30-kilometer run, how to nourish yourself. When you are doing anything like that, an endurance event, the blood is all going to your muscles. There is no blood going into your tummy for digestion. And therefore, you must not look at solids to be consumed. Look at semi-solids or liquids. And there are enough options available where you get protein gels and you get nourishment drinks, which will give you the required extra calories that you need. Secondly, there is a limit on how much your body can absorb in an hour. Your body will not absorb more than 240 calories an hour, which means that if you take one protein gel that is 100 calories, then you should not be consuming more than 2 protein gels in an hour. If you take more than 240, then that results to bloating in your tummy and you start feeling discomfort. You may even start getting nauseated and puking. These are the two things which I would say is for race day. And whatever you're going to do on race day must be practiced adequately during the training. Otherwise, you can't suddenly come on race day and start this. Now, second aspect is the nourishment that you require when you're preparing. So an ordinary person, a person who does his normal daily routine needs about 2,000 calories a day. In addition to that, you are training. Depending upon how much training you're doing. And if I was to put a ballpark figure to say, if you're running 10 kilometers a day, I'm just giving an example, that would consume about 600 to 700 calories additionally. That means your meal must cater for 2,000 plus your training additional calories, so 2,700. That additional 700 calories, you have to see how you're getting it. Because we normally on a daily basis also eat a stomach full. Now you need to add 700 calories to it. If you do 20 kilometers, you may be adding 1,300 to 1,400 calories. So that amount of additional calorie intake needs to be catered for in terms of protein and carbs. So that is something that you can calculate. And in the choice of your diet, whether you're a vegetarian, you're non-vegetarian, you're North Indian, South Indian, what are your food preferences, you will have to come onto it by hit and trial. No nutritionist will be able to tell you that if you have an additional dosa, to tumhara kaam ho jayega. Nahin. You will have to see how much to have, and you will get to know that if you are starting to lose weight or you're starting to gain weight or you're stabilizing. So that is just a rough guideline. Otherwise, there are more scientific ways of also working it out. But what you eat is up to you. Then is the hydration part. When you are working out, you lose a lot of sweat. And in that sweat, apart from the water that you're losing, there are electrolytes. And the biggest electrolyte which comes out is sodium. That's why your sweat is salty. So you have sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, and phosphate. These are what you lose in terms of electrolytes. And you need to replenish them. Normally the mistake we make, and that is what we did in the academy also, when we were there, Joshran gaye, pani peete rahe, you've been losing salt. And then you'll find people fainting. And I remember about 2 years back, 2 cadets even died in the Josh run in India.
Correct.
IMA or whatever. That was due to electrolyte imbalance. So you must have hydration tablets. There are these tablets which come, which are now commercially available. You put one tablet into a bottle of water, and that is the water you should consume. So you're having water, and you're also replenishing your electrolyte imbalance. Now, how much to have depends upon how much you sweat. A person like me who sweats more needs 2 tablets an hour if it is summer. Somebody else who sweats less will need 1 tablet an hour. But really, there is no adverse effect even if that 1 tablet guy has 2 tablets. There are no adverse side effects. But you need to hydrate your electrolytes and your body. So these you can read upon, they're available, whoever is interested. If you YouTube them, hydration, nourishment for endurance events, whether it's cycling, running, whatever, you can read up on that.
Okay, very nice. So how could you manage your job and your family life along with all this massive preparation?
So the job, there is no way you can compromise. Like I said, I had to spend those 10 hours and that was my, duty. And I was the head of my organization, so it can't be that the head is missing, saying, I'm going for a run now and you guys manage on your own. So there's no compromise there. But then you have to compromise on family life, social life. I never partied for many months. So much so that my friends stopped inviting me. They got upset. They don't understand that you're doing Ironman, so you can't come. So we're calling you and you keep refusing. Someday some excuse, and you run out of excuses also. Then they say, okay, go to hell, don't come. But that is a sacrifice you'll have to make. So you sacrifice on social life. In family life, I feel if you convert quantity time into quality time. So whatever little time you get, you spend it nicely, and then your family must be on board. They must be with you in the mission. If they are not, then it becomes a little more difficult. Not to say that you have to give it up. It's slightly more difficult, but otherwise, if they are on board, then that it's more smooth. But there will be sacrifices to be made, because when you are devoting your energies elsewhere, then from somewhere you have to take out that time and energy and money and give it somewhere else, because there's only a finite amount of everything available.
Fine. That's great, sir. So you had narrated in one of your talks that on a Sunday afternoon you cramped, and thereafter how you got back and you got your rhythm and you again got going. So did you ever feel that you were risking cardiac arrest?
So it was, yeah. I was worried that time when I fell down cramping that this could lead to a cardiac arrest, because I was cramping in my stomach and my chest. So there was a good chance for a cardiac arrest that time. But like I said, it passed, fortunately. And there was nobody on that road. So I was happy about that initially, that, nobody's seeing me lying like this on the road. I was lying on a road, cramping, and I couldn't do anything about it. The pain was so excruciating. But luckily, nobody was around. And in about a minute's time, the cramps ceased. And then I could get up. But surely there is a chance that it could have led, a cardiac arrest can happen to you anytime. Wherever you can, you shock your heart more than it's used to, or it can take at that time. Saying so, I'll narrate this incident which happened in South Africa last year. In the Ironman competition, 2 of the swimmers died due to a heart attack during the swim. And they weren't, greenhorns. They were experienced guys who had trained and come. But despite that, because they overextended what they had probably planned, they went faster than that or started competing with other people, they suffered heart attacks and died. So it can happen. That's something you have to be prepared.
मैं समझ गया हूँ बात।
Huh?
मैं समझ गया हूँ, मैं नहीं करने वाला हूँ Ironman. Fine. Because we can, the risk is there. You are pushing your body to the limits, so risks are there. That we must.
I want to say out here,
Yeah.
Cramping is different than pushing your body to a point. Now that day when I cramped, it was not because I had pushed myself. It was because of the hydration. I had lost more salts than I could take, which I was speaking about the electrolyte imbalance. When electrolyte imbalance happens in your body, the first reaction is cramping. You'll find people get a cramp while swimming in their ankle, in their calves, or you get a cramp in your thigh when you're running. That's due to electrolyte imbalance. When the electrolytes drain out and now your body is low on fluid, cramping is the first sign. In my case, it happened in the abdomen and the chest. It was again due to bad electrolyte stuff, though I'd had, but I was not yet so experienced that time about the quantity. So that after this incident, I went and read up more. And that's when I realized what had happened. It never happened to me after that again. I said, as far as the heart rate is concerned, you need to monitor your heart rate. And when you train, unlike what we were taught in the academy, where we were taught no pain, no gain, that make them run so much that they come out flat, that's the wrong way to train. Here you need to train by monitoring your heart. So when you do your training for, say, even a marathon, you don't go by your running pace, you go by your heart rate. So the way to do that is to calculate what your ideal heart rate is and take 80% of your maximum heart rate and fix it in your running. So like I wear a Garmin watch, you fix your heart rate in that. And the moment your heart rate crosses what you fixed, it gives you a signal. It means you need to slow down. You need to slow down and keep your heart rate below that 80%. And that is how you train. And this training will take at least 5 to 6 months. Your heart gets stronger. And at the lower heart rate, your pace will go up. So without your heart rate going up, your pace goes up. When your heart rate remains low, your recovery is faster, the calories consumed from your body are less, and therefore your overall endurance becomes better.
Very, very nice, sir. Thanks a lot. I've experienced this cramping. Generally, I've never cramped out in a match. I've got up at calf. Now suddenly it's got excruciating pain and all. Then I have to keep rubbing, drinking water and all that. That's what I've experienced. So there's also electrolyte imbalances only, sir.
Yeah.
So we are coming to the end of our talk, sir. It's been great learning from your experiences and your knowledge on various things. So what are your suggestions for young defense aspirants, sir?
Well, I would tell them that if you are already decided that you want to join the defense, then I will not talk of that part because your decision has been made. But now, before you move ahead, you have to prepare yourself for the examination and the SSB and the medical. So start backwards. I'm sure Colonel Nehru has already given you all these tips, but since you asked me, I'm giving my experience in this. First, get your medicals done, that you are medically fit to be able to join the army. Having put that aside, then of course you need the written examination and your SSB, for which we have Colonel Nehru, who's probably more competent and doing a more professional job than what I'm going to tell you. But I feel that the three things that you must keep in your mind when you go for the SSB is you must be genuine. So you must appear genuine to the SSB panel. And by that, I mean that if you in a form have written that you are, for example, a basketball player, and then when you questioned about basketball, you should know everything about it. You should not be filling up things in that form just to, form an impression, a good impression. So that genuineness of yours will be tested during your interview. Next is your confidence. And that confidence will come if you know what to expect, if you have prepared well, if you have faith in yourself. So you may have plugged, you may not have made it first time, second time, third time, but you have to have that self-belief that, okay, this time I'll do it. I'm training hard for it. That training or preparation will give you confidence. And the third is that thread of positivity which you exude when you ask questions. Everything must be positive, must be logical, must be connected. You don't just start firing it in the air and giving answers which you maybe have been tutored to you by somebody else or somebody else's experience. Apply yourself and be logical and positive. So these three things I feel is all that you need to do. Rest, No Frills Academy will teach you.
So we come to the end of this interview. It has been a great experience for me, sir, interviewing you. We have known each other since long, but there are so many things which I did not know about you. Like your CGPA of NDA, how you were struggling.
That's embarrassing.
मैंने कहा सर तो sort of honor वगैरह है, सर का तो CGPA वगैरह तगड़ा होगा. But
NDA में. CGPA was NDA. I may have worked hard in my academics.
No, I got it. I know. IMA CGPA, nobody is much bothered actually. NDA में CGPA वगैरह ज़्यादा देखा जाता है.
Yeah, it was bad. My CGPA.
Great knowing you, and also, sir, very nice of you to have shared your very, very frank views, and I'm sure I don't have any words to express. Your experiences will definitely benefit our students, and on behalf of all of them and on my own behalf, I thank you a lot for sparing your time and sharing your views. Thank you very much, and I wish you and your family great luck, sir. Good luck to you, sir. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you very much, Nehru. It was a pleasure being here, and wish all your students and your academy and you all the best. I'm sure majority of them will make it with your guidance. So good luck and Godspeed.